Good evening. I would like to report on the state of our war against the American people. We're mounting a sustained campaign to crack down on every American and every person of every faith, and every nation, and to bring them to justice. All missions are being executed according to plan, without warning or provocation. Americans are being swept up in an international dragnet. Thousands of FBI agents are on the trail of other citizens here and abroad. It has everything to do with hate and evil and murder and prejudice. America is strong.
Federal agents, we are armed!
Welcome to the second episode of Unstacking the Deck. I'm Jason Robo.
And I'm Kyle Beatty.
Today we have a show that's on the false left-right paradigm.
Yep, Jason's right. We're going to be discussing the false left-right paradigm in America and across the world. People for too long have been being fooled by the duopoly of power in this country, known as the Democratic and Republican parties. These both parties have the same interests, work for the same people, and essentially are towing the same line, no matter which administration there is, as has been evidenced by George W. Bush and Barack Obama's presidencies, which has seen basically the exact same thing.
Yeah. And sometimes in election, especially recently, it's struggling to hear people, voting anybody but Bush, and it's kind of a slogan when generally voting for the lesser of two evils is still nonetheless voting for evil.
Yep, that's correct. And as long as people continue to vote for those two parties, you will not get a third-party candidate. You will not have someone who actually represents your position, and you will continue to be getting screwed by the system and the people in charge of it.
For today's guest, appropriately, we have David Cobb. He was a Green Party presidential nominee in 2004, and he now lives locally in Humboldt County, working with a nonprofit called Democracy Unlimited in Humboldt County. They have a website, duhc.org. We'll tell you more about them later.
Yep, we're going to be discussing with David Cobb his experience in politics as a third-party candidate, trying to get into debates against John Kerry and George W. Bush. He was arrested there with Libertarian candidate Michael Badnarik. It's going to be a good show. I hope you will all enjoy it, and look forward to seeing what your comments are.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd that the debate process is restricted to only this limited, finite, two-party duopoly. It's very indicative of how the whole thing is pretty much fixed. Like the name of our show, Unstacking the Deck, pretty much that these whole things are rigged. They'll never leave your control unless you just get up and stop playing at that table.
Yeah, it's one party more than a dictatorship. This show's word is tyranny. Tyranny, as defined by the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, is oppressive power exerted by government.
This is a Latin word root from the word tyrannus, which actually meant master, and also has roots in the phrase cruel or unjust use of power.
We will be discussing tyranny throughout all of our shows, most likely, and I suggest that all of you find out what the word means and start looking for it in your daily lives.
And as it applies to this show, generally, we are being scientifically,
Tyrannized?
Tyrannized, yeah. It's being enforced upon us by the use of our psyche against us, and they pretty much pick our brain. So there's a lot of ways tyranny manifests. It doesn't necessarily have to be, some guy with his boot on your neck right at that moment. It manifests itself in all sorts of other intangible ways.
Yep, can be manifested through mind control, influencing, advertising, chemical-induced problems that people have because of all the pharmaceutical industry that's so prevalent right now.
Yeah, if you really just open your mind, you can see all sorts of different layers of tyranny.
This show's local news starts with more DA news that's going on in the upcoming election for district attorney. Gallegos is now seeking endorsements. He has opponents of Kathleen Bryson and Allison Jackson now, and they will be all hopefully having debates live soon, and we will be able to find out more about the candidates.
Yeah, Allison Jackson is someone that just recently, since our last show, threw her hat in the ring. And this is coming from the Humboldt Herald. It talks about how she was a bitter rival of Gallegos and supported one of his opponents futilely. And she also is a supporter of cracking down on unpermitted building and increasing the amount of fines for doing such and violating zoning and building permit stuff.
So in a lot of the parcels out in Humboldt County, she's worried about buildings that are structures that are being created that aren't necessarily legal or haven't been permitted by the county.
Yeah, by their definition of legal.
And of course the permits cost thousands of dollars sometimes. You have to jump through hoops, sign all kinds of papers, go through lawyers and all kinds of business just to erect a small cabin on your own property.
Yeah, or even a shed.
Yeah, it's pretty criminal, all of the permit laws, I would say, because they basically permitted away people's own rights. They've permitted away your normal own property that you're supposed to control and be able to do what you wish with it. In other news from the Humboldt Herald, Stephen Glazer, the former Arkley spokesman, has been chosen to be campaign manager for Jerry Brown, his gubernatorial campaign that's underway. You may remember Glazer. He was involved as a spokesman for Arkley during the whole Larry Glass incident, where Arkley shoved Larry Glass at a meeting. He's been a very outspoken proponent of the Home Depot on the waterfront here in Eureka. And, this is really a clear example of what our show's about, of the left and right working together, because this man was working here locally for a high Republican donor and party member, Bob Arkley, and now is going to go be a campaign manager for a Democratic governor.
Yeah, straddle both sides of the fence because it's their whole ruse is controlling both sides. When you have a fight that's fixed, you have to have both boxers sold out on it.
And in fact, the Humboldt Herald even says, it might seem strange that Glazer fronts for both a big-time donor to far-right Republican causes and a Democratic candidate for governor, but that's the way the Glaze rolls.
Yeah, it's not so strange after watching this show on the false left-right paradigm. In other news, this is also from the Humboldt Herald. There was a poll on the site, and it was local banks versus the giants. And it turns out that over half of the people in the poll have joined Redwood Capital or the local credit union over the regular large banks. And about a fifth plan to still move their money, and 17% are staying with the big banks for now.
So less than 20% actually have full confidence in the big banks.
Or at least enough to stay, whether they're comfortable. I mean, there could be a multitude of reasons.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good news. I hope that people continue to move towards the local banks in our area. We need our money to stay here. We don't need it to be fractionally reserved out to loans in other parts of the country and other banks in other countries entirely, as what happened with a lot of the bailouts this last year. And it's a good thing for people to be sticking in their local areas with their money here. Our next bit of news, a blog, The Red-Headed Black Belt, and it's a discussion about survival, basically. Having enough food and water around. We just had a large earthquake here. Everybody, I think, that I saw at least, they were all rushing to the gas station right after it happened. People were freaking out, going to the stores. You need to already be prepared for when something like this happens. A local church, the LDS, has put together a display, the women's group there, and this display shows basically what you would need for one person for an entire year. They recommend that everybody have at least 2 weeks worth of food and some gallons of water saved up.
Yeah, I mean, generally most people are so dependent on the systems that are out there that are generally not sustainable, that when they're not any longer in effect, that they're going to be pretty much out on a limb and not going to have a clue what to do, because most people don't even know how to provide for themselves on any short-term basis, or sometimes even camping, let alone, being able to filter your own water and all that kind of a thing, and survive in certain circumstances.
And they also suggested to everybody that after you have your necessities prepared and socked away, you talk with your family, friends, and neighbors. Try and figure out a meeting place where you guys can all help each other. There's going to be elderly people in your neighborhoods who are going to need help. Younger people who are going to need help. It's everyone's duty around to try and help out your neighbors and everyone around, for everyone to be able to get through a crisis like that with the least amount of injury.
In some other exclusive local news that has not been covered by any other outlet, Kimberly, a.k.a. Verbena Star, represented herself and emerged victorious in a local court hearing on trespassing at City Hall's parking lot at the conclusion of a homeless encampment, protesting the lack of provisions in places for homeless people to go in Eureka and Humboldt County.